Und jetzt, alle Teilnehmer befinden sich im Zuhörermodus.
For this, 30 minutes, we will have a rather brief look at one of the business models developed in L3Pilot. I will give you a quick overview of what we'd like to talk about. So just to be on the safe side, please please mute yourselves and turn off your cameras so we don't have any interruptions and the quality does not suffer. You are encouraged to pose any questions that you might be interested in via the questions box in your panel. We will monitor those, and later on we will have the opportunity to answer them. Of course, depending on the number of questions, we might not be able to answer all of them, but we will certainly get back to you for any inquiries that you have today. And of course, you can also contact us by email at any time. This webinar is being recorded, and we are going to use Multimeter, which I will introduce right now. So additional opportunity to give us feedback and to learn a bit from you. We would like to use Multimeter. In order to use that, please go to this URL. So it's menti.com. There you enter the code that you can see, so 393641. I will give you a moment to do so. So once you see the first question for us to learn a bit which stakeholder group you belong to, it would be interesting to hear who we are talking to, what your background is. Please. While you're filling the stakeholder groups, you might notice that these are not the standard that you see quite often. That's not a coincidence. Of course, there we call the groups that we have the business model. So it will be quite interesting to see who is represented. So we see we have quite a few others. Okay, we have a RoboTaxi, very interesting. Okay, so we see we have a lot of people answering others. So of course, that's also interesting feedback for us to see how you identify yourself with the actors in this business model. Maybe it might become also clearer for you once I introduce them more in detail. See, we have a vehicle manufacturer, very important. We have a considerable number of travelers, which are, I would say, the central piece of this business model, and we have a potential robo-taxi provider. So why are we giving you this webinar? The idea is really to take a moment to introduce you to the work we have been conducting in L3Pilot with regards to business model for 2030. So the idea is really to look into 4 different business models that might drive the demand for automated driving. And of course, we want to exchange with you. So we would like to hear your evaluation, and see how you think this would be viable, and what are the important challenges to tackle there within the next decade. Of course, we would also like to raise your interest. We will hold expert talks in the coming weeks, where we will have the chance to go a bit more into detail. Of course, this is an introduction to that. Each of the business models that you will learn about in the coming coffee break series will be represented in expert talks. And there we will take the time to, for instance, bilaterally discuss the details about your stakeholder perspective. I will also give you a brief introduction to L3Pilot and a very brief overview of the business models to come. And lastly, we will, of course, use your feedback. Any questions that you're posing today, any feedback that you're filling in via the Multimeter to also feedback into the work that we are conducting and to adapt them to the reality. Most of you will be will know it already. We have a considerable budget. There's 1,000 drivers driving 100 cars in 10 countries in Europe, including cross-border testing, and we are testing level 3 and level 4 functionalities in the project. Here you can see a very rough overview of the business models we chose for our analysis. Here, the reasoning really is that we looked into the applications that are already being developed, and we took out 4 different business models that might be a bit of a cornerstone for the different areas where the technology that might be used. So of course, these are certainly not the only business models there will be, but they should be also a bit representative. And today we will be talking about the Robo-Taxi. So that we analyzed the business model here is that we use the BaseX approach, which is a bit different from the business model canvas that you might know. The nice thing about this approach is that it's really focusing on the co-created value in use, and it's using a focal organization that is coordinating the efforts of all different roles and actors. So first of all, we are really focusing on the value that is arriving at the user, and what is also very useful about this model is that it's quite flexible. So in really looking at this this co-creation process, we are able also to adapt to different technological and changes to the business environments. Maybe before we dive into the details here, just to give you a rough idea of what we are talking about. We're talking about 2030. We are looking into level 4 cars for this business model, so it's quite a clear definition. And of course, there's also limited ODD, which in fact is not such an easy question. You will be aware of this. This is really quite an important question when it comes to also the implementation and the different actor roles. So to give you an introduction to this model, I will show you the different roles. What's important here is that these are really actors. So it's absolutely possible that one stakeholder takes up multiple of those roles. It's not necessary that they are separated. So for instance, when I will show you the OEM will certainly be also, for instance, able to manage the fleet, of course. But here, really, the idea is the actors and what role they have in the business model. So the first one, and of course the most central one, is the traveler. The traveler is creating the demand, driving the demand for this business model. By providing, of course, demand, also by providing preferences and usage data, which can be used to develop the business model. And the traveler in exchange gets useful and private commutes. So maybe to explain a bit the reasoning for this description, the idea of useful there is really that you, for instance, comparing to driving your own vehicle or driving on your own, you will be able to work on your way to work. You will be able to do anything that you would like in the car. And in addition, they're also private. So compared, for instance, to public transport, where you might also be able to have other activities, you are in your own vehicle, so you don't have to respect, for instance, other passengers in the train. Another crucial role is the RoboTaxi service provider. And this RoboTaxi service provider is really the one who is coordinating all the efforts and being the front end to the traveler. So this is a crucial role in really allocating the taxis, in providing the contact point for the traveler. And of course, the RoboTaxi provider is also getting something out of it. So they are getting a fee out of it. And they have a crucial role, as without such a coordination, the service would be practically impossible. The payment provider is quite important as well. He's making sure that trustful payment can be conducted. And of course, this is absolutely crucial, as an easy and accessible payment is really necessary for the comfort and the trust of the consumer. Then we have insurance, which also has a crucial role, as they are really providing financial safety to the actors involved and by distributing the risk that are involved. Of course, they might gain user data, turnover, and fees from that. And their rule, I would say, is quite crucial, as they are lowering the barriers for investment in this business model by lowering the risks. So the risks of new investors and of course also of the customers are lower in using the business model. The municipality has an interesting role as well, as they are providing infrastructure and regulation. So of course, as these as these robotaxis are using communication technology to drive autonomously, they need, for instance, CITS infrastructure, which is absolutely crucial. And there, of course, the municipality has a very important role. And the same goes, for instance, also for instance, access to the city centers, special lanes that might be dedicated. So this is quite open, but it's clear that it's an important role. And for the regulation also, it's an important role, as we need legal certainty for the involved actors. Again, this is lowering the investment barriers and lowering the risk. The telecommunications providers are important, as they are providing the connectivity and the security. So they are transmitting data. They are getting out of this, first and foremost, a messaging fee. And of course, this communication is also crucial for offering the service to the consumer in a most accessible way. We have vehicle manufacturers. Without the vehicle manufacturers, there would be no robotaxis. So that's, of course, also absolutely important. It's quite open. We only have defined that the robotaxis will be level 4. So from the side of the OEM, there could be different ways of producing those. It might be series vehicles that are used. It could also be really specific vehicles that are produced for this service, maybe at a specific price. And lastly, the fleet operator is crucial to keeping the fleet, keeping it clean, comfortable, safe, and possibly also allocating the robotaxis. So I will give you the chance to discuss them later on. Okay, I just see a message that my audio is being interrupted. Okay, I hope you can hear me well. So we will take your questions. We are collecting them right now, and I will take a moment later to answer the for these challenges. So of course, it's not an easy feat to implement this, and there's a lot of different questions that are still open. And here you can see a small collection of questions that we received during an internal workshop we had in the L3Pilot project. So I think the most prominent question that we received was always, what about the ODD? So of course, just by telling you L4 robotaxis, you don't really know how it will be implemented. Of course, it's absolutely crucial to define the ODD, for instance, if it's day or night, if it's only urban, if it's suburban, if the road surface has certain requirements, the weather, the traffic flow. There's a lot of these questions that are open, and of course, they need to be clearly defined. And it's also absolutely crucial to understand this and predefine that correctly for the door-to-door service, because of course there, if you are a consumer, you are really expecting that the RoboTaxi will work without any interruptions, and you should be able to easily understand if you can access it or not. So that's important, and you will see that a lot of these actors are involved in this question. The public acceptance is not an easy one as well. There's a lot of open questions, for instance, regarding the safety, but also regarding, for instance, the costs of such a model and possible privileges that the robotaxis might get over other modes of transport. And there, of course, there's always the comparison to other modes of transport, such as for instance, public transport like buses, which are already running and quite environmentally friendly. So these are questions that need to be answered. The investments are quite massive. Here really it's absolutely crucial, again, to have clearly defined the legislation. And of course also an insurance, for instance. And then there's also the question of scalability, and of course the question also of how to reach a critical mass of consumers in order to be able to make this profitable. So if you have any other challenges that might come to mind, please post them in the questions. I'll be happy to discuss them, and we will certainly take note of everything that comes to your mind. In the meantime, I'd like to have a further Mentimeter. We have three different criteria here that we worked with during the analysis. So the question whether this business model is feasible, so if it's actually possible to implement it. The question whether the business model is viable, so if it is financially sound, if it makes sense, and also, of course, again, if the upfront investment makes sense. And lastly, whether people want it, so if it's desirable. And then we have an additional question, which is also, of course, interesting to us, is whether you or your organization could see a potential role in the future in such a business model.
Okay, so this the there's actually less people who it would be very interesting to hear where this reasoning is coming from and what concerns you have there. A rather easy one is from your perspective the desirability. So you seem to be quite positive that this is desirable, and actually quite a good in such a business model. Okay, so these are quite interesting responses. It would be very interesting to hear your more detailed feedback during our talk. And the last question here on the content, I'd like to hear what are the initial weak points that you would see right away. So I named the challenges before, but yeah, that's really the challenges we need to overcome during the next decade, and any improvements that you could see. So for instance, if you see any challenges related to the viability, to the feasibility. Okay, we see infrastructure immediately. Absolutely, that's an absolutely crucial point. As I said, we need the communications infrastructure. We need to define where those vehicles can be driven, under what conditions. This is also related to the other two answers. So we have the regulation of the traffic flow. Of course, this is also related then to the political discussion and the public acceptance. We need to provide an additional value and an improved traffic flow. And of course, this also needs to be coordinated between other actors. The public space management is absolutely crucial indeed. So yeah, as I said, there might be, for instance, specific lanes for the robo-taxis. We have ride sharing. Yes, that's an important point as well. So kept it simple in this regard. This is of course a very interesting and interesting to see whether sharing the rides, security is public acceptance, liability, certainly. That is quite important. See, it's very important, of course. RGI should allow for such service and to be priorities for regulation, make understand the benefits this law practices from conventional taxi drivers. So that's what we did before. So it's really crucial to show it's for other modes. Okay, thank you very much for all of this feedback. We'll have all of this and we'll set estimation for starting point. All right. So now I'd like to ask my colleague to read out some of the questions we received. Okay. Sorry, I see I still have connection problems.
So,
Hello.
Nitin?
Yeah, thank you, David. So we have a couple of questions. So the first one is, what is the difference between fleet operator and robotaxi service provider?
Yeah, that's a really good question there. As I said, for instance, the question of the allocation needs to be clear. So in this model, we assumed that the allocation would be done by the fleet operator, so the physical allocation, but the coordination then would be taken up by the robotaxi service provider. So the robotaxi service provider is really just having a digital platform which is unifying all of these actors and being the front end, and of course coordinating the requests from different sides.
Moving on to the second question here, we have, are there already any companies which declare that they will provide the class L4 for robotaxis? The participant says they haven't seen any vehicle manufacturer until now who would claim that the L4 car will be available anytime soon for the public. So they would like to know, do you know when the testing could start?
Okay, good question. I cannot speak for the vehicle manufacturers here, but yeah, there are certainly vehicle manufacturers who are testing technology that is going into that direction. So as I said, we have already a testing of some level 4 functions in L3Pilot, for instance. Which could also be applied, so for instance, in urban contexts. But I would not assume that any vehicle manufacturer, I would say they will be quite prudent in claiming that they have a level 4 vehicle available at this point that could provide a service, of course, also looking to liability regimes in Europe.
Thank you. So we also have interesting feedback here from one of the participants saying the infrastructure needs to be adapted to be suitable for L4, but if you want to use them as robotaxis, they should be able to drive anywhere. Now it's not the case. So.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. So the infrastructure needs to be adapted. And as I said, it will be expected from the consumer that in this predefined zone, the robotaxis will be able to drive without any problems. So again, here the ODD is absolutely crucial, and the regulation and the provision of this infrastructure to make this possible. So there needs to be a very clear communication between the involved parties. Okay. Thank you very much for the questions. I'm registering all of them, and I will answer them. I have your names in my notes as well, so we will get back to you. To conclude, raise your interest the upcoming coffee break series. So we have 3 more on different business models to come. You can see them here. So we have them each week on Tuesday at 10:30. And we will also be contacting you and would be glad to get your interest for the expert talks that we will conduct later on. So to be and give more detailed feedback than was possible in this very brief time today. So for that, I would like to ask you to enter your answer if you are interested in Multimeter as well. And we will certainly get back to you to organize this expert talk within the coming weeks. So I will leave this Mentimeter open just so you have enough time to fill it in if you are interested. And then I will close this. And thank you very much for your attention. And enjoy the rest of your day.